Sekigahara, the 21st of October, 1600. In the fog, a blind man in a litter gives orders he cannot see obeyed and waits for the betrayal he already knows is coming. Why would a dying general fight a battle he was certain to lose? He was blind, dying, and certain he would lose. He still had himself carried into Japan's greatest battle. For a friend, everyone told him to abandon. What does that kind of loyalty cost? Otani Yoshitsugu was born around 1559 into a family so obscure that historians still argue about where it came from. Some accounts make his father a minor retainer in Omi province. Others place the family far south in Kyushu. What is certain is that he was not born to power. He entered the household of Toyotomi Hideyoshi as a young attendant, and he rose the way men rose in that household. Not by taking heads on a battlefield, but by being useful. In an age that counted a warrior's worth in kills, Yoshitsugu was counted in ledgers. By the time Hideyoshi ruled Japan, Yoshitsugu was one of the men who made that rule function. He audited land surveys, moved rice, arbitrated between lords who despised each other, and handled supply for the invasions of Korea, the unglamorous machinery of an empire. A story later generations love to repeat has Hideyoshi saying he wished he could give Yoshitsugu 1,000,000 men to command. Whether or not the words were ever spoken, the judgment behind them was sound. Yoshitsugu was given Tsuruga, a port in Echizen. He was barely 30, and everything lay ahead of him. Then he began to lose his sight. The illness that blinded Otani Yoshitsugu has been called leprosy for 4 centuries, and modern historians are no longer certain. The sources are late, the descriptions vague, and the label was convenient. What the records agree on is the effect. By the late 1590s, he could no longer sit a horse. He appeared at council with his face wrapped in white cloth, and he withdrew from the company of men who had once been his equals. Illness in that century was never only a medical fact. It was a social sentence. There is a story about a tea gathering. The bowl was passed from guest to guest, each man drinking and handing it on. And when it reached Yoshitsugu, a drop fell from his face into the tea. The bowl continued around the circle. Every man after him raised it to his lips and did not drink, except one. Ishida Mitsunari took the bowl, drank all of it, and asked for more. The anecdote appears in later collections, and historians treat it with caution. But it has survived 400 years because it explains something that otherwise makes no sense. Hideyoshi died in the autumn of 1598, leaving a 5-year-old heir and 5 great lords sworn to protect him. Within a year, the oath was theater. Tokugawa Ieyasu, the richest and most patient man in Japan, began arranging the political marriages the regents had expressly forbidden, and nobody could stop him. Mitsunari tried. He was the administrator's administrator, brilliant, rigid, and comprehensively hated by the field commanders whose expense accounts he had audited. In 1599, 7 of them came to kill him in the streets of Osaka. He survived and withdrew to his castle at Sawayama. In the summer of 1600, Ieyasu marched east, ostensibly to punish Uesugi Kagekatsu for refusing a summons to the capital. Half the great lords of Japan rode with him. Yoshitsugu was among them. Ill as he was, he had raised his troops and started north, and his road ran past Sawayama. He stopped to see Mitsunari. What was said inside that castle was recorded by no one who actually heard it. What is certain is that Otani Yoshitsugu entered as a commander of Ieyasu's army and came out as something else entirely. Mitsunari told him he intended to raise an army against Ieyasu, while Ieyasu was hundreds of kilometers away with his back turned. Yoshitsugu told him no. The accounts have him refusing 3 times, and his objection was not to the plan, but to the man. Mitsunari was loathed. He had no gift for making people follow him, and a coalition against Tokugawa Ieyasu would be held together by nothing except personal loyalty. The one currency Mitsunari had never learned to spend. Put another name on it, Yoshitsugu argued. Mori Terumoto. Anyone the great houses would rally to. Mitsunari would not be moved. And so Yoshitsugu did the thing that has kept his name alive. He turned his army around and joined a rebellion he had just finished proving could not succeed. He was not deceived about the odds. He had calculated them himself, out loud, in that room. He is said to have told his own retainers plainly that they were going to lose. Then he went to work, writing to wavering lords, drafting the coalition's oaths, organizing an army for a doomed cause exactly as he had once organized one for a winning one. Through the autumn, he watched the coalition he had warned about come apart before the fighting even began. Lords signed and then hesitated. Messages went unanswered, and one name kept returning to him: Kobayakawa Hideaki, 19 years old, sitting on Mount Matsuo with 15,000 men on the Western Army's own flank. Yoshitsugu did not trust him. So when the armies converged at Sekigahara in the fog on the 21st of October, he placed his 600 not facing the enemy in front, but turned toward the mountain, toward his own ally, with stakes and barricades between them. The battle opened around 8 in the morning, in fog so dense that units fired on their own side. Yoshitsugu could not see it. He fought the largest battle in Japanese history blind, carried in a litter behind his lines, taking reports by voice and giving orders by voice, holding a picture of the field in his head that he had assembled entirely out of other men's words. For 2 hours, the Western Army had the better of it. Ieyasu, waiting for a signal from the mountain that never came,
is said to have chewed his fingernails to the quick.
At noon, Kobayakawa Hideaki came down off Mount Matsuo, straight into the Western Army's flank. 15,000 men against 600, and the 600 did not break. Yoshitsugu had spent weeks preparing for exactly this. His line absorbed the charge, held, and drove Kobayakawa's troops back up the slope. The accounts say it happened twice. For a few minutes on that field, a blind and dying man in a palanquin was winning the argument he had lost at Sawayama. That the plan was sound, and only the loyalty was rotten. Then, 4 more commanders on his own flank turned their spears around. Wakisaka, Ogawa, Kutsuki, Akaza, and the position folded from the one side he had left open, because that side was full of friends. Yoshitsugu understood immediately what it meant. He asked to be set down, and he took his own life there on the field, with the battle still audible around him. His last order went to a retainer named Yuasa Gosuke. Take my head, and let no one ever find it. Gosuke carried it away and buried it. It has never been recovered. The Western Army disintegrated within the hour. Mitsunari ran, hid in the hills of Omi, and was found by a villager 6 days later. He was paraded through Osaka and Sakai and beheaded on a Kyoto riverbank on the 6th of November, refusing to the last to admit he had been wrong. The war Yoshitsugu had said could not be won lasted a single afternoon. Tokugawa Ieyasu took the country, and his family held it for 268 years. Everything Yoshitsugu had predicted in that room at Sawayama came true, almost exactly on schedule. There is a grave at Sekigahara, up a wooded path away from the main battlefield markers. Tradition holds that it was raised by Todo Takatora, who commanded troops on the other side that day, and who had known Yoshitsugu for years before the two of them ended up at opposite ends of the same field. There is nothing beneath the stone. The head Gosuke buried was never found, and the body was never identified. What Takatora built was a marker for a man his own army had killed, on ground his own army had won. Modern historians have grown careful about the illness. The earliest sources are vague, and the diagnosis of leprosy hardens only in later retellings, written at a time when that disease carried enormous social weight, which is exactly when a label starts doing narrative work, the evidence never supported. What is not in doubt is that he was gravely ill, that he lost his sight, and that he covered his face in public. And that in a society where a warrior's worth was performed on horseback, he kept command of an army from a chair for years. So why did he do it? The romantic answer is the tea bowl. One man's kindness repaid with a life. Historians offer colder ones. Yoshitsugu's lands and his son's future were bound to the Toyotomi house, and a Tokugawa victory would end the world he had spent his whole career building. Both explanations can be true at once. But the detail that resists every cold reading is this. He told Mitsunari the plan would fail, was proved right in every particular, and joined anyway.
Men acting purely from calculation do not usually argue themselves out of it first.
Otani Yoshitsugu left almost nothing behind. No lasting house. His son fought and lost at Osaka 15 years later. No surviving castle. No great victory attached to his name. What survived was the shape of a decision. A man who saw the ending clearly, said so out loud, and walked into it because someone he owed had asked him to. Sekigahara made Tokugawa Ieyasu the ruler of Japan. It made Otani Yoshitsugu the argument Japan has been having with itself ever since about what loyalty is actually for.
Next time on Samurai Chronicles, a one-eyed, lame swordsman who talked his way into the service of the most feared warlord in Japan and became the mind behind Takeda Shingen's campaigns. In 1561, on the plain of Kawanakajima, he split the Takeda army in two and sent half of it up a mountain in the dark to drive Uesugi Kenshin down into the jaws of the other half. At dawn, the fog lifted, and Kenshin's entire army was standing directly in front of him. Yamamoto Kansuke did not intend to survive his own mistake.
Otani Yoshitsugu proved that his side could not win, and then died on it by choice. Subscribe to Samurai Chronicles for a new story from Japanese history every single day.